Welcome to The Alignment Show, featuring conversations with folks who have taken steps to identify their highest values and align their lives around them. Time on this earth is not unlimited, and you may be seeking to make sure you spend your time on things that matter to you. These conversations will encourage you and support you in doing so. Now, let's meet this week's guest on The Alignment Show. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is in your part of the world. Welcome once again to The Alignment Show. This is episode number 47, and we'll be introducing our guest here in just a moment. I'm your host, Don King, as usual. And as usual, we want to remind you that we've got a book out there, The Way of the Three-Year-Old Why. Now, there is some movement within the publishing sphere. If you want to learn a little more about the book, here is a QR code on the screen. And for those of you who are listening audio only, you can go to donking.com. That's DONNKING.com/3YO. That's the number 3 and the letters YO to learn more about the book. But its sequel is out there. We don't have a way of doing so quite yet. By next week's show, we'll have that up there, but you will be able to download the first scene of Medium Well, if you would like. It continues the story of Dan Roberts in a way, but it may surprise you. Hope Roberts figures into that. Now, if you haven't read Way of the Three-Year-Old Why, you don't know who she is. But I think it's an interesting story, and that's going to be coming along. So if you go ahead and check on donking.com/3YO, then you will be in a position to learn about that and to be able to get the link to download that first scene automatically. So that will be coming up. Now, we're talking about my book, but, just here recently, we've had a lot of writers and authors on the show. As we always say in that case, this is not a show primarily about writing or about writers, but because the nature of the Alignment Show, where we are talking with folks who have taken steps to bring their lives into alignment with that which matters most to them. I think every writer I know has gone through that, and so it's kind of natural that we would have a lot of writers on. And I am happy this week to have with us a writer, as kind of I'd have to say, a new writer. I'm getting to know him through our friend Noemi Barris. His name is Harrison Stockeland. He is an American author whose take on the crime thriller genre has been called twisted originality. I'm really interested in that aspect of it. He incorporates real historical events and environments into his fiction novels. That's part of his signature style. And when you read his work, you can expect to be challenged, shocked, and left clinging to the very last line, something that cannot be ignored in what is often a world of bland, disjointed commercial fiction. So, there's a lot of that going on these days with AI-generated stuff. Our friend Jo Penn says the way to stand out in today's market is to double down on being human. And I think that our guest today is exemplary of that. So without digging any further, let's find out how he got here. Let's welcome Harrison Stockeland. Harrison, welcome to the Alignment Show.
Hey, Don, I'm excited to be on this week.
Very good to have you on here. So, you heard the build up here about the writer thing. One of the topics I know that you talk about on similar podcast, is challenges facing young writers. So that key there is young writer. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but what age are you?
I'm 20 years old, so I'm at the bottom of that young writer barrel, right?
Okay, yeah. And it's always a touchy subject sometimes to ask people their age, especially those of us who have a few years on us, But
Yeah.
but I'm have not had on the show, but there have been some. I know a writer who has put a book out and is a real book. That's not a playbook.
Right.
14 years old, and so
Wow.
yeah, I'm always fascinated by people who know early in life what it is that they want to do. Because writing is not easy, as I'm sure has been your experience. So, what led you to decide that writing represented the best way for you to live your life? After all, there are easier ways to earn a living.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. I think for me, it was a gradual buildup over many years, trying to figure out how I wanted to express creativity. I mean, I've always been a creative person. I've always kind of had that photosensitive mind. I've been in love with movies for as long as I can remember. And this is a little dirty secret about me as an author. I like movies more than I like books, which is not something you'll come across with authors that much. But I watch movies all the time. I mean, I read too, but movies are my thing. I remember falling in love with Indiana Jones when I was 10 years old, and that's just something stuck with me. So that kind of visual creative process has been something I've always loved doing. Now, you
Yeah.
fast forward to when you're 14 or 15 and you're trying to make a movie. Your budget is about $60, and you can't really you can't really have all the explosions and the cool stuff, and so that kind of bums you out of that process, and then you try different things, and nothing. I wasn't really good at a lot of other stuff. Like, I liked drawing and I liked painting and like all the classic art school things, but I wasn't good at them. And I tried, but I wasn't good. And then COVID hit, and there was nothing to do, and I had played at writing, like you said, a playbook, right? I'd
Mhm.
played at writing when I was younger, just school projects or this or that, and I didn't really mind it. And then COVID came around, and I was like, it'd be kind of fun just to sit down and write something. So over 4 months during COVID, with nothing else to do, I wrote 130,000 page, or 130,000 words, excuse me,
Wow.
130,000 word book, and it's awful, and no one else is ever going to read it. It's the worst piece of literature ever created. But that kind of kicked off my interest. I was like, man, I really love doing that. Like, I spent hours and hours a day doing it. No one was telling me to do it. I just enjoyed it. And so from there, I just kept going, and I wrote 5 books before I published Watch It Burn in February of last year. So there's a lot of backstory there. It wasn't just Watch It Burn. I whipped up one day and I was like, hey, there we go. It took a while for me to build up into that kind of into that space where I felt like this is worth, like, it's a product, right? So it's worth putting this product out. It's worth putting my name on it and showing it to other people. So it took a while, but when I got there, I was thrilled and very excited. It was years and years of work kind of culminating in that one space.
Absolutely. Gosh, there's so many things struggling to get out of my mouth right now. First of all, the idea that you wrote 5 books before getting to the one that you were willing to put out there in public, that in and of itself is not all that unusual among writers.
Hmm.
But for you to do that between the ages of 15 and 20, now
Yeah.
that's unusual. It's unusual for somebody to write 1 book during that period of time. It strikes me as interesting, exciting that first book, even though you felt like it was not good, and most of our first books are not,
Yeah.
but 130,000 words. I mean, a lot of first books come in at 20,000.
Yeah.
So without spending too much time, because as you heard us say, this is not primarily a writer's program,
Right.
but I've
Right.
got to indulge my curiosity a little bit.
Hmm.
When it was going over 100,000, was that on purpose, or was it just that you couldn't quit? Couldn't figure out where to go with the plot, or because a lot of books are that
Yeah.
length, especially in the genre in which
Oh
you
yeah.
write.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not an unusual length. I think what happened to me is kind of that classic author run-on syndrome. I just didn't know at the time. So really, I would just pick up little ideas here and there throughout the day, and then I'd figure out how to inject them in the story, and that just made it super, super long. So there's all these weird things in the story that don't need to be in there. So it really should be 60,000 words, right? It should be half the size. But it's that first one, and I didn't really know what I was doing. That's the same story for the first 5. You
Mhm.
just figure out what works by actually going through the process, figuring out, okay, I bit off way more than I could chew with this. This isn't my style. This isn't something like, dystopian thrillers are great. I'm not a world builder. That's not what I do. So, learning those kind of things is what those first few books were for. And especially that first one, I really tried to cram as much into that as possible. So,
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways we can slice the whole writing approach, and people are all over the place on this, but
yeah,
tends to be either character driven, scene driven, that is location driven, or plot driven. In other words, you got to have all of those, but there's one that comes first for a lot of writers. We
yeah,
mentioned Jo Penn a couple of times already. She tends to start with an interesting location. Stephen King tends to start with interesting characters and put them in a um, difficult situation. In writing those first 5 books, were you figuring out what drives you, or did you know because of your interest in film? Even as a writer, I would say you are a visual writer. You're thinking in
absolutely.
scenes.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
so? At this point, what does it seem to you comes first for you as you come up with a concept for a book?
Definitely, I see everything visually. So, and oddly enough, the ends usually come to me first. So I'll get the epilogue before I get anything else, and I just kind of build off of that. Like the little grain of sand inside a oyster. Working on seeing if I can make it a pearl. If it doesn't turn out to be a pearl, I just toss it in the trash and move on to the next idea. But generally, I would say my stories are character driven, but I do enjoy having those strong scenes. I enjoy having those strong plots for sure.
Hmm.
It would be a toss up between characters and plots. I really do pour into my characters, and I have a lot of characters in each book. Um, but you could say like the three main characters in each book, I really pour into them, and I want them to feel like genuine people that you understand and that at least about a third of the way through the story. I want you to feel like these people,
Hmm.
and I want you to be able to predict some of the things they're going to do, but I also want you to be surprised by some of the things they're going to do as well. That's what keeps you entertained, right? You realize, oh, maybe I don't know this person as well as I thought, and I think that creates a really really fantastic storyline, and it feeds into the plot.
Okay, okay, and it is certainly a viable technique to start with where it's going to wind up. Reportedly, that's how J.K. Rowling approached Harry Potter.
Mm,
But then I've also heard Rachel Herron has said she is not a plotter. There's this debate among writers: plotter versus pantser. Are you writing by the seat
yeah.
of your pants? Discovery writers, the more polite term.
Yeah.
Rachel's very much a discovery writer, and so she has said if she knows how the book is going to turn out, why should I write it?
Mm.
You know where it's going to turn out. Do you have the plot in mind before you start writing, or is it more, I know where it's going to wind up, I just have to build it backwards? How do you approach that aspect of it? Does that make
Well, I mean,
sense?
there's definitely a lot of gaps when I start writing and when I, finish the manuscript and send it off to the editor. There's a lot of gaps in there um, that I have to fill through the process, but I have the general bullet points laid out. I would say if I had to be a plotter or a pantser, I would say I'm definitely a plotter
Mhm.
because I know where it's going to end up. And my response to why write it if you know where it's going to end up is because the ending is pretty awesome. I mean, that doesn't change how great I mean, I understand if your ending isn't that good, if it's just a boring, ending, or the epilogue is 15 pages long. Like I love to inject the final. I guess my in my stories they get a little brutal sometimes, and most times, and I like to inject the final gut punch in the epilogue. That's one of my favorite things to do. I like to leave you kind of doubled over on that last page, and so I think that's definitely worth writing, even if I know about it for the 4 or 5 months it takes me to get that done. So
Oh yeah, yeah. And I personally, I relate to that. I'll a little secret out about me, I guess personally. Before I buy a book, if I'm browsing on the shelves, especially, I'll pick it up and I'll turn to the last part. I want to know where it winds up
yeah.
because as I'm reading the book, I want to see how the writer develops it.
Mm,
And so in my own writing, I kind of follow that same approach. The excitement for me is in how do I get from here to there, and
Yeah.
kind of sounds like the same thing for you. Of course, readers don't know where it's going to wind up. Most don't turn to that last chapter the way I do. Oh man. Well, so what as a writer, of course, there's
Yeah.
multiple hats that we wear.
Of course.
Your imprint is Gun Monkey Productions, which
Hmm.
the logo I love.
Yeah. Right.
I'm curious about. Did you come up with a logo yourself? But this is a minor question, just
Yeah.
curiosity.
Yeah, so the real quick skinny on that, like I said earlier, growing up, I loved the drawing and stuff. I just wasn't good at it. So I idolized one of my uncles is a designer for 3M. So he's an amazing artist. Like he's top tier. He does cartoons and all this stuff. So I said, hey, this is the name of my company. I'd love you to whip up a logo. I think it'd be super special if you did the logo for my company. Just like I always loved his drawings when I was a kid, and I was like, hey. And so he just whipped that up first draft, and I was like, this is perfect, right? It's a for those of you who don't know, it's a chimp smoking a cigar with a Uzi in his hand, which is just a submachine gun. So it's a pretty on the nose logo for the name of the company, but it's pretty neat. So that's the fun little story behind that.
Absolutely. I think I can get that
Yeah,
up here on the. Let's see. Is this? Yeah.
yeah,
Here's
that'd be
your
great.
website.
Yep, there it is,
And
right
you can
there.
kind of see it up there at the top. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I mean, that's an attention getter here. And of course, this
yeah,
is your latest book that we're seeing on the
yep.
screen, which we'll talk a little more about that in just a moment. But as long as we're on the website, I mean, both of the books are right here on official harrisonstockland.com. Stockland is Stocke. Okay. So again, we'll come back to it because we want to show that some more. But that the logo there gives you an immediate sense of what you're talking about, the nature
Yeah,
of the thrillers that you're
absolutely.
writing. So what would you say is your long term vision? There are writers who sold well with one or two books, but they quit writing or whatever. Then there's
Hmm.
others that have been writing for 43 years. So are you going to? I don't want to phrase it that way, but I can't think of another way to phrase it. Are you going to stick with this, Harrison? Like is this what you want to do with your life? Or you want to move
Yeah.
broader? What do you think?
Well, I think so. Vision wise, I mean, you mentioned vision earlier. I definitely have two concrete visions for this. The first is being I want to release 2 books a year for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
That's doable for me. It takes me about 3 to 4.5, 5 months to finish a manuscript. That includes going over it a couple times myself, filling in gaps, making sure there's no continuity errors, and then sending it off to my editor. I have an amazing editor, by the way. He's credited in November's Whisper. He didn't do the first one, but he did November's Whisper. So if anyone out there wants an amazing editor, you can go check in there, figure out how to get a hold of me, and I'll hook you up with him. But anyways, so it takes me about 5 months to get a book done, and then another month in kind of post production. You'd say the cover's getting finished. That's another thing. So I'm self published, so I design all my own covers. With an artist. Again, different artist. Have my editor take care of things. And then we get it all set up and get it released. So 2 books a year is very doable for me,
Mhm.
and I have way more than 2 stories a year worth of content that I need to put out. So I'm behind already. I've got about a queue of about 6 stories that I know I'm going to write. So that's if you do the math, that's 3 more years of books that I've got already set up. So there'll be content coming out for a while. And the second pillar of that vision is I want to perfect the crime thriller, but I also want to step outside the genre. So, a little inside scoop for you here. The next book coming out is a Western. So, I grew up on Westerns. I loved, all the old spaghetti Westerns, Bonanza, Gunsmoke, Rifleman, all those old shows on MeTV. So, I wanted to pay homage to that. And so, the next book that's coming out is a Western. So, I'm stepping outside the genre, right? But in a way I'm not really because it's about bank robbers, right? It's about that classic kind of tropesy Western story. So it's still a crime thriller. It's just 150 years before today. So, but yeah, I wanna be able to step in and out of the genre as I as I please, as I come up with stories that fit in and out. Like I definitely see myself doing some drama type stories that are not necessarily focused on police investigations or mobsters or detectives, like those kind of things.
Mhm.
So I want to be able to do that because I think that's very important. If you get stuck kind of in one rut where you're writing about the same super secret agent man for 25 years, I think you kind of fall off a little bit, and it starts to become the same story over and over again. And you're wondering, why is this guy 25 years old when his first appearance was in 1986? And it's 2023. And why has he never died? And why has he never gotten? You start asking those questions, and that's something I don't want to do. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And it's interesting because the advice that writers get constantly is that in order to leverage your sales higher,
yep,
stick to a genre.
mm,
But hardly any working writer I know actually does that. I mean,
yeah.
I've
I mean,
I've mentioned a couple of them here already. Rachel Herron has 5 or 6 genres she writes in. Jo Penn, Mark Leslie Lefebvre, all these folks. They know the advice, but they don't stick with it because the
yeah,
whole reason for writing is that creative outlet.
mm,
Um, and it sounds like you're fitting right in with that. Now,
yeah,
for listeners, okay, here's something that I've been hearing a lot lately. This is one of the changing landscapes. Harrison mentioned that he's independently published. Some people say self-publishing. I tend to avoid that term because sometimes people will think it's the same as vanity publishing, and it's
yeah.
not. I
Right.
mean, it's
Yeah,
professional publishing, okay?
that's a great
But
point.
because of the impact of independent publishing, the brand is Harrison Stockland.
Mm,
There will be people who will read anything that Harrison Stockland writes, whether it's Western, nonfiction, whatever it is. So are you consciously building a brand? I know your mother is in business. You've got the uncle who's in business. How much does the business consideration come into the decision to build the Harrison Stockland brand versus sticking with a genre?
yeah. I mean, I definitely think I have a bit of an advantage when it comes to independent publishing, on the business side of things. Like I mentioned to Don earlier, my mom is a business coach. So if I fail at business, it makes us both look bad. We make that joke a lot. Like we both look really bad if I fail. But that being said, I grew up in a family where industriousness was a very valuable trait. Everyone in my family is very industrious. My dad has been top level corporate America for as long as I can remember. My mom has been a very very successful entrepreneur for as long as I can remember. My sister, not so much in the business side of things, but she's 18 years old. She's my younger sister, and she is ranked 8th in the world for Ironman triathlons. For
Wow.
those of you who don't know, that's a 160-mile triathlon. Like that's a huge race. She just competed in the World Championships, and she's going to the pre-Olympics in Spain next fall. So my whole family is very on this go-getter level, and so that's been very helpful for me. But back to the business side of indie publishing, I think where I get some advantage is that I have the mindset that this is a business. I'm not the type of writer, and there's value in this because some of the best content we get is from people like this. But I'm not the type of writer that wakes up at 10:30 in the morning, rolls out of bed, kind of watches some TV for a while, writes a couple paragraphs, plays video. Like I don't really do that. I just get up and go. I write at least 1,000 words a day, and that's after I get home from my full time job. So there are some sacrifices you have to make there, but that's just the way forward. And like Don has been saying, this is a labor of love, and you just kind of keep pushing through that. And that business mindset and those resources I have really give me kind of a foot up because I understand that behind the really fun, cool book that I wrote, it's really exciting. There's numbers and there is sales and there is profit and there is cost. And it's all like, it costs money to independently publish. Like you said, but I like that difference between independent publishing and vanity publishing. I like that. I've never heard that differential before.
Yeah.
Um, but when you're independently publishing, you're spending money on your business. I suppose when you're vanity publishing, you're probably spending money on yourself. So instead of buying, your new Louis Vuitton bag, you publish a book and you show all your friends and this, that, and the other thing.
Well, and let me just interrupt real quick
Yeah,
for
yeah.
listeners. Vanity publishing has been around for a long time, but the business model for the publishers there is you pay us to print your books. They're
Mhm.
offset printed, and you
Yep.
stack them up in your garage. And there's, there's they don't really care whether you sell the book or not.
Right.
And so that's why vanity publishing can have because they'll print anything.
Oh,
They'll
yeah.
print
I mean, you're
schlock.
paying them. Of course they will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And in the case of independent publishers, you hire your own editors, you hire your
Mhm.
book your cover designers, and all that kind of thing. So yes, you are spending money, but you are doing it as a business person, like you're talking about here. You know
Yep.
your market. It's the equivalent of being a small press.
Oh,
So now I
yeah,
know
absolutely.
Harrison knows this. I just want to make sure anybody listening, understands that difference there. So
Mm.
sorry to interrupt, but
No, no,
go
you're
ahead
good.
with it there.
Yeah, no. So I think that kind of gives me a little bit of an edge. I'm looking at this from more of a bird's eye view than I would say most other independent publishers I've met are, and I think that that will give me an advantage long term, just because I'm looking forward. I'm looking down the road for the next year, the next 3 years. Like I said, I have those stories lined up, figuring out which order I want to write them in, release them in. All that is very important. So, yeah, I think it just gives me a little extra layer of foresight there.
That makes a lot of sense to me. What advice would you give to somebody? And let's put it in the context of your age. I'm just to give me quick context. Are you doing college or you've gone straight to the workplace?
I've gone straight to the workplace. So,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, right out of high school, I won an internship in Washington D.C. So I was out there with a trade association for 5 months, and that was amazing. I love that. And to actually get a job out there with those folks, they wanted me to go back to school and go to college, and that's never really been something I've been super interested in. So I moved out here to where I live now in Middle Tennessee, and I work full time. Like you said, straight into the workforce. So it's very interesting building a career in two different kind of lifestyles, but it's been a lot of fun and it's been a huge learning experience for sure. I don't feel like I'm 20 most days,
Mhm.
but then every once in a while I get a crude reminder when I try to rent a car or something like that. Um, but I always tell people I'm not. I turned 21 in June. I'm not super excited about hitting the bars and stuff. That's just not really my thing. But
Mhm.
I am excited to get access to some of the places that it's just absurd I can't go in now. Or like trying to adopt a dog. I'm not old enough to adopt a dog, which is crazy because I have my own house. Like I own a house. Why can't I adopt a dog? So there's stuff like that just kind of bothers me. Um, but yeah. Anyways, so
Oh yeah, I
I
mean,
guess
there's all kinds of ageism there. So, but the
yeah.
only reason I asked that question was a lot of people at your age. How should I put this? Again, for context, for regular listeners know this, but you might be stumbling across this podcast. In my day job, I teach college,
Mhm.
and that's not why I'm asking about college, Harrison. It's just that this is the age group that I'm around a lot.
Yeah.
And so a lot of 20-year-olds are still walking around trying to figure out what's their reason for breathing.
Mhm.
And you've got so much figured out at this point. And so that's why I'm asking for the question. If you were talking to somebody your own age
Yeah.
who's trying to figure out what the heck am I here for? What do I need to do? I'm not saying what would you advise them to do? It's
Mhm.
how would you advise them to figure out
Yeah.
what matters to them so that they can get their life on a satisfying track. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
I have those questions myself every day. There are days where I'm like, man, this writing thing, but like for the most part, it's a labor of love. What I would suggest is that you just try stuff. I mean, that's kind of what I've been doing since I was young. My parents always encouraged me to do that. They're like, try it. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it twice. That's one of the best little expressions I've heard. Most times, if you don't like something, you don't have to do it twice. So just try it. If it even appeals to you a little bit, give it a shot because there's definitely going to be some value in there, and you're going to find things that you love that you never even thought of before. So
Absolutely. Well,
yeah.
and I'm looking at our time before we get too far gone here, I
Hmm,
do want to talk about the books themselves. I think an
okay.
easy way to do that. Let's put up the Amazon. Let's
Oh,
see here.
perfect.
I can get to it most easily here. Here's all the books. Amazon's certainly not the only book place out there, but it's a big one. It's easy to reference. So we'll put
Yeah,
links
both
to the
here too.
books in the show notes, folks. But we've got two of them out there right now. Watch It Burn and November's Whisper. And one of the things, by the way, I see that Harrison is on the cutting edge here. You might notice there's a Watch It Burn collector's edition. I mean, there's a lot of authors that go a while before they figure that aspect out. You know, so
Well,
uh,
that was kind of a funny story because I had to submit a my hardcover got jacked up in post production, and so I had to submit a new version, but I couldn't use the same title, so I
right.
had to just figure out how to wing it, and that's what you get. So if you want to get in on the ground floor, if you want to get in on the first level, you can buy that collector's edition. It'd be super cool. So
Very good. And you know, I mean, can you imagine having gotten a copy of Carrie, you know, when it
hey,
first came out? I mean, who knew at the time what Stephen King would become? So, you know, you could get a Harrison Stockeland collector's
there you go.
edition. It's a true collector's edition here.
Yeah.
And again, for folks who don't know the industry, you get things messed up, have to put a new title out there, new ISBN, the whole bit. Uh, it can be kind of frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, that's the say. I mean, I could go on for hours about the frustrations, but hey, it's all worth it. Something I would like to mention real quick about ordering books. If you order from my website, it'll take a little bit longer to get to you, but I'll get it signed. And if you leave a note in your order, I'll personalize it to you as well. All those orders go straight to me. The labels print out in my office, and I sign and send those books myself. So if you order through my website, I'll sign it and personalize it for you as well.
Excellent, excellent. Let's put that up here again. We've got the QR code on the screen for video watchers. And if you're on audio only, the link will be in the show notes. And we can say it out loud really easily. It's officialharrisonstockland.com. You
Yep.
just need to know that Stockland is Stockkeland.
Yep.
But that link will be in the show notes, so that'll make it easy enough. That's a fantastic marketing approach to offer the signed copies. I mean, that's
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, I figure if you're gonna spend money on my book and I have the facilities to sign them and personalize them, I'm gonna do that for you. I mean, I think it's just kind of a way to give back a little bit. So
excellent, excellent. Well, there's always a question I'd like to ask as sort of a wrap up, Harrison,
mm,
and that is, there's almost certainly something that you wish that I had asked that I didn't.
mm,
What would that question be, and what would your answer to it be?
that's tough. I mean, you've been really great so far. I think if we have some time, I'd love to just talk about November's Whisper a little bit.
Yes, please do, because
Yeah.
that's the latest one. Watch It Burn came out. Both of them came out in 2023, I think, right?
Yes, sir.
And
Yep.
Watch It Burn, or excuse me, November Whisper, no November or November's. I don't have it.
November's possessive. Yep.
November's Whisper
Yep.
came, ironically enough, came out in October, I think, right?
November. Yeah, November.
They did come out in November. Okay,
Well,
so that
yeah. I
that's
mean, if
good
you're
marketing right there.
right. If it's in the title, I should probably release it in that same month. I figured I would get some hate for that if I released it in December, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and tell us about that.
Yeah, so Watch It Burn, just real quick on that one. That is a kind of a classic mobster story with a huge twist. If you love movies like Scarface, Goodfellas, like I said, I love these movies. I grew up on Scorsese. Like this is stuff I really love. So if you like that style, Watch It Burn is definitely something for you. If you don't like blood or gore, probably not your thing. Even though it is a book, it's very very violent, but it's a lot of fun. So if that sounds like something you'd like, check it out because it's pretty cool. November's Whisper is a little bit different. That's kind of a step back into the. I tried to do like that kind of L.A. Confidential style, style of feel in a 1980s setting in small town Massachusetts. So November's Whisper is about an FBI profiler who is sent down to Ipswich, Massachusetts, which is this wonderful little small town 30 miles north of Boston. and he's sent down to investigate a set of murders that appear to be linked and appear to also be linked to a murder that happened a few years prior. And it kind of goes through the whole investigative process. He's working there with as a part of a multi-agency task force with the state police and the local police. So the three main characters are the FBI profiler, a local detective, and a state detective. So it kind of goes through their entire investigative process. Now, the neat thing about this book that I always like to tell people, because I'm very proud of it, is I spent over 100 hours researching for this, which is kind of rare for fiction, especially fiction in this day and age. So I interviewed multiple law enforcement professionals, detectives, all the way from the local level to the county to the state level. I actually interviewed a former head of a state police force, and who also worked as a investigator at a point in time up in that area. And I spent a lot of time with legal professionals. I actually have a connection here in the Nashville area with a former assistant district attorney. So I spent a lot of time interviewing these folks, a lot of time asking questions that directly relate to this story, because I wanted to make it as real as possible while still kind of, you got to have some fictional elements in there, but I wanted to make it feel like it was a possible story, not something crazy. So I really spent time in those interviews, and then on top of all that, the amount of reading research I did was insane. I read several books on this topic of profiling. I even have the FBI's handbook from that time, because it's different now, but I have the
Yeah.
handbook from that time. It was a very strange time for the FBI because they were transitioning from kind of J. Edgar Hoover's sort of iron fist leadership to new leadership, what you'd call like the more modern leadership, because he ran the bureau for like 45 years. So
Yeah.
one of those things that's very, very interesting. But spent a lot of time researching. So this book definitely has a lot of depth and a lot of layers to it. And if you like true crime, this is about as true crime as you can get while still being fiction. It feels like one of those true crime podcasts, where it starts off in the rainy days of 1979, and then you cut forward to 1983. Like, this is one of those stories that I think you'd really enjoy if you like true crime. So I have a little bit of something for a couple different audiences, but they're both a lot of fun. I mean, I think if you enjoy crime novels, if you enjoy the kind of movies I described, you'll like both of these. But yeah,
This brings up a question for me.
sure.
Writers will do the kind of research that you're talking about, and even this getting at the age thing again, Harrison. Even
Oh yeah.
older authors a lot of times will have trouble getting the police to take them seriously.
Oh
They
yeah.
don't want to take the time to talk to some writer. They're going to screw it up anyway. It's
Hmm.
not going to be good. Um, what There's a how to. There's a what happened
Yeah.
question here. How
Yeah.
did you get them to cooperate in the interviewing, and how did they react to the book when it came out? Did they say, hey, wow, he did a good job with this?
Yeah. So the first part of that, kind of the how to, I don't think I got them to do anything. I think it was more of just I went into it with the foresight of knowing I'm 20 years old. I look like I'm 20 years old, right? I'm not one of those 20-year-olds that looks like I'm 30. I look very young. So, and I don't have a super deep voice. So all that stuff kind of factors in. But I know I look like I'm 20. So the only thing I kind of had left was like, okay, well, don't talk like you're 20. Come up with good questions ahead of time. Be mindful about these interviews. Don't just like put it off, and then just show up and be like, so what's it like to be like? You want to come in with like really right, like you want to come in. You're laughing because that would turn you off immediately.
Yes. Oh,
You
yeah.
want to come in with these questions that are well formed, specific, but also open ended. I'm not gonna really ask yes or no questions,
Mhm.
because
You've
I
done the
like
research ahead of
yeah,
time. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
and I'll usually like lay out the story, like, hey, this is the kind of story I'm writing. I have questions about this, this, and this. Do you think you could contribute to that? And usually the answer is yes. Now, I did think initially, I was like, these guys are going to be, annoyed, frustrated. Like, this kid's writing a story about like my career, my lifestyle. Like he doesn't know this, that, and the other thing. Um, but that was kind of the opposite of what actually happened. I got involved with a lot of these guys, and they sat down. They love talking about their careers. They love talking about the ways they've helped people over the years. and they really enjoyed kind of answering my questions because, in a way, most of the guys I talked to are retired. I talked to a few active folks as well, but most of the questions I'm asking, it kind of triggers this response in their mind, or at least I think this is how it goes. It triggers this response in their mind where it's like, oh, I'm in this investigation, like I'm trying to solve this crime. So you ask them these questions, and they're like, start like kind of laying out this roadmap for you of like, okay, well, if that happened, then did they check on this and this and this? And I'm like, no. And then I write those things down, like this is how they would check on this and that. There's a part in the book with a payphone. Someone makes a call from a payphone, and and they're trying to track down who this guy was, which payphone this was. And I found out in northern Massachusetts in this time frame, the payphone system was kind of jacked up, so they could only tell which county the call came from.
Hmm.
So it was very, and they got the county and the serial number for the phone instead of an actual phone number. So that would make tracking down a payphone call extremely difficult because you'd have to manually drive to each payphone, check the serial number, which is 19 digits long, and then drive to the next one. And there's hundreds and hundreds
Wow.
of them, thousands in these counties. These Massachusetts counties are massive.
Yeah.
So there's things like that you learn that's like, oh, that's crazy. So that's in the book. And I wouldn't have that without talking to some of these folks. And so coming up with the specific questions that are open-ended, so you kind of get that run-on answer that you want, and they bring up different things, and then all of a sudden you're at the point where it's like, well, hey, I had something similar to this back in the day, and this is how it kind of played out, and this and that. Um, One of the biggest things that was really cool, talking to the ADA from the former ADA from Nashville, um, he had lots to contribute on the legal side because that's definitely where I was lacking the most, and that's the hardest to kind of figure out because it's very situational. It's not as procedural as the police department. It's very situational
Mhm.
because there's strategy involved and all these things. And I had some interesting legal situations in my story. So there was a lot of help to be found there, and I got some neat stories from back in the day and things like that. And then when the book came out, the responses I've gotten from some of the folks I've interviewed, some of them haven't read it, haven't picked it up. They all have them. I mailed them. I made sure they got copies right off the bat.
Yeah.
Some of them haven't read it. Some of them started it. Some of them finished it. I've only heard good things so far, so I'm hoping it'll stay on that track. They seem to enjoy it. I want it to kind of resonate like if you watch the show True Detective on HBO, where you watch that and you go, "Wow, this is really cool. This is great." And then you get to the end and you're like, "That's crazy. That would probably never happen, but it's still super, super cool." I kind of want it to have that resonation where like it feels real most of the time, and there's certain parts where you're like, "That would never happen," but it's still really interesting. And if it did happen, it would happen exactly like that.
Excellent, excellent. All righty. So cool to see your process, and I appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that with us. So we are a little bit overtime at this point.
Oh,
So
all
if
right.
you will hang around in the green room for just a moment so I can thank you properly. But
Yeah, absolutely.
here for our listeners, I want to say thank you for coming on the Alignment Show. I think you are presenting a great example for our listeners, even those of us who have a few years on us. It's inspiring to
Yeah.
remember how to figure out what matters most to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. So I'll talk to you in just a second. Let's tell folks in the meantime, coming up next week on the Alignment Show, we have a guest by the name of Deb Keevan. And she is an interesting conversation. She's somebody else that Noemi Barris has connected us with. So I'll be putting out some information about that. Be sure that you go to, and I need to put a different crawl down here. Remember that you can always get the show notes at confidencecultivators.com. It's up here in the upper corner as well. You can find out about this show. You can get the links. You can also see past episodes, learn about upcoming episodes. In any case, we hope that it is time well spent for you to help you as you are figuring out how to live your values so that you can value your life. We will see you next week on The Alignment Show. That's it for this week's episode of The Alignment Show. What has it inspired you to do in your own life? Whatever it is, take action now and take the first step. It will help you to talk with a friend about what you're thinking. Share confidencecultivators.com to spread the goodness. and remember to live your values and value your life. We will see you next week on The Alignment Show.